Nostalgia is powerful. A lot of us cherish memories from our past which, when evoked, bring a sense of joy that is rarely matched by anything else. Today, people under the age of 40 have seen the rise in prominence of technology that shaped our world as we know it. Right from color televisions, cellular phones, laptops, touchscreen technology, digital music and film, all the way down to the internet. Among these things is video games. Whether in the form of coin-hungry arcades or home consoles, many can associate their childhood to a favorite game in some way. With the film industry cashing in on nostalgia by offering remakes, remasters, and re-releases, the games industry is no different. But what started as a quick attempt at easy revenue is slowly evolving into something meaningful. And if this trend continues, gamers, game studios, publishers, and the legacy of the game all win. Let's take a closer look at Game Remakes and what it does for the industry. Hi, I'm Ishak, and this video is brought to you by XE Gaming. Before we begin, it is important to distinguish the terms remake and a remaster. A remake is simply creating what was previously created using current technologies and done in a way that caters to the current audience. And this applies to both film and games. In this scenario, the remake of a game often results in a superior product on all accounts when compared to its old counterpart, the Final Fantasy VII remake for example. But the same can't be said about movies. For every Casino Royale, we have a Fantastic Four, and for every Dread, we have the Mummy. Remasters, on the other hand, work the opposite way. Where films benefit from better visual quality on older movies with a remaster, a visual overhaul for games rarely does the job. The gameplay is often unchanged and as a result feel dated, and the visual improvements amount to very little. They simply don't match the way the game played out in our minds from back in the day. So these are two completely different beasts that have different value propositions in both industries. The point of this comparison is to understand the contrast between the two medium and to remember the distinction between a remake and a remaster and what they mean from the perspective of video games as a medium. Older games are tricky. I remember being blown away by the first Uncharted. The game released around the same time as the first Gears of War, which was making all the headlines. But booting up Uncharted and making my way to the top of that U-boat is a gaming moment etched forever in my brain. As years passed by and having played all the subsequent Uncharted games, I felt the urge to relive that initial moment of awe and booted Uncharted 1 through the Nathan Drake trilogy, which, as you know, is a remaster of the first 3 games on the PS4. It was at that moment that I realized how dated the game felt. The gameplay felt loose, and those visuals were not as good looking as they were in my head all these years. What felt groundbreaking back then did not really live up to the current standards. On the other hand, I still have loads of fun playing through Super Mario World on my trusty old SNES on a CRT TV. This game has aged like fine wine and holds up even today. Now, this does not make one game better than the other. My point is, every game is different in the way they are designed and executed. Over time, industry trends and gameplay evolutions favor some designs in old games, while many other elements get outdated. But what is immeasurable between the two games is the pedigree of those intellectual properties and what those titles mean for the millions of people who have played and loved them. From that perspective, every game that has been well received is a great game, whether it ages well or not. The proposition of a remake only ensures that the games which may not have aged well get a new lease of life with up-to-date visuals and oftentimes gameplay changes. It is probably in this sentiment that a company like Sony felt the need to remake Shadow of the Colossus, an absolute classic which was only held back by the PS2's hardware capabilities. And a more recent example, The Last of Us, which is being remade as The Last of Us Part 1. It is notable that both of these games have had remasters for their subsequent consoles, but the remake with better visuals and, at least in the case of Last of Us Part 1, better gameplay mechanics help solidify the legacy of those games while also getting modern audiences who may have missed it the first time around. Remakes and remasters are often frowned upon and are seen as easy cash grabs from the companies doing it. There is also the question of resources being used up on older games instead of making new creative titles. While these are justifiable questions to a degree, there is much more to it in the grand scheme of things. Remasters offer little in terms of improvement in games, both visually and functionally, and are oftentimes masked to hide the lack of backward compatibility between console generations. That said, a remaster is done within a fraction of the time compared to that of a full game development. So the jury is out on remasters. Remakes, on the other hand, typically take the time of a full game development cycle, depending on the project, while in turn offering better overall visuals and gameplay enhancements, sometimes completely changing genres for better or worse. There is also the argument that this approach completely removes the nostalgia element of those games, and thus do more harm than good. There are people who prefer the old games the way they were, and that is okay, because those games can still be played, provided the hardware associated with them are still available. This is where the topic of game preservation kicks in, but that is a conversation for another day. Now let's get back to that question of resources being spent on remakes. Historically, remaking an old game has rarely come at the expense of a new project. Companies like Capcom, Square Enix, Activision, and Sony all have multiple development teams working on many projects. So it is safe to say that new IPs are greenlit when these companies feel that the concept for those new IPs have a market. So if the choice were to be given to you on whether you would want a remake of one of your most favorite childhood games or a new IP in a genre that is saturated, what would you choose? Now there's something to comment on. All things said and done, remakes have, at least so far, done more good than bad. I mean, check these games out. How could they not be a good thing? Yes, it may look like companies going after low-hanging fruit, but I don't think that is the way to look at it when the end product is so good. Publishing companies may appear to be playing it safe by remaking a popular game rather than creating a new IP, but it is not entirely true. The risks taken with the Resident Evil and Final Fantasy VII remakes are telltale examples of a company putting their prized properties on the line in order to modernize those games, ultimately resulting in remakes that were loved by millions. Franchises like Yakuza, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon have all seen great success in their remade forms, reaching millions of new audiences, while the aforementioned Resident Evil and Final Fantasy VII remakes modernized the game with a complete overhaul to gameplay and visuals while adding more to the story. Personally, I feel that this era of remakes is making the vast majority of the gaming community happy, and if this trend continues, we may have some true classics revisited in some unexpected ways, which is always a great feeling. Think of a Metal Gear Solid 3 remake. Doesn't that sound crazy? That is the potential for any popular old game out there. And I hope long dormant franchises that once made headlines like Dino Crisis and Final Fight get their long overdue revival. So that was our take on game remakes. What do you think of The Last of Us remake, or Resident Evil 4 remake for that matter, or remakes in general? Sound off in the comments. And for more nostalgia-fueled topics, check out our review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Until then, I'm Ishak, and this video was brought to you by XE Gaming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. You take care, stay safe, and keep gaming.